evening, Lord Cantrill, and I'll invite. After them, we also have the chair of the. No, that's for the next item. I'm jumping ahead of myself just because I'm looking at the front row there. Right? If we could have Wendy Blythe up to speak.
A warm welcome to all new Assembly members. Regarding the Greenways proposals, please can you confirm that there will be no removal of historic cobbles or other historic fabric or bridge or path winding or removal of lights or railings in the historic hall, and that any signage or bridge or path winding for these proposals will be subject to consultation and planning approval. FECRA members have noted that there are proposals for new greenways over sensitive areas such as Grantchester, and our city commons such as Sheep Green and Cove Fen are also part of the historic fabric of our city, referred to by landscape architect Tom Turner at the recent Greenways seminar as like medieval manuscripts, equal to the best art in the Fitzwilliam Museum. So widening paths and bridges would be hugely detrimental to their character. So my question is also, what landscape impact assessment has been done regarding the visual impact on these very sensitive historic landscape areas? Is any land take involved, and is there a budget for that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Lord Cantrill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm before the Assembly this afternoon as a City Ward Councillor in Newnham. Firstly, I welcome the proposals in relation to cycling infrastructure in general. As we've heard this afternoon, it will clearly provide help in terms of a modal shift towards sustainable transport and improve the air pollution in Cambridge. My question, though, specifically relates to the greenways in relation to Barton to the city centre. And during the consultation, quite a number of residents have raised with me specific points in relation to that particular route and what they would like to see. Firstly, they'd like to see quite an important component of the route taking into account junctions. That's the Grange Road and the Barton Road junction, to improve road safety for all road users, but in particular for cyclists and pedestrians as they cross Grange Road coming into the centre of the city. And then also, as important, the Newnham Road, Barton Road junction, which is actually a key junction for cyclists moving from the west to the east, and also for cyclists moving in the other direction as well, going north and south. And the final point in relation to key things they would like to see, it comes back to a point that one of the officers raised. At the moment, the Greenway scheme seems to be a hub and spoke proposition. And actually, many areas of work in the future will not be in the city centre. So actually, what I'd certainly like to see is an off-route cycle route going from Barton Road to the West Cambridge site, just at the city boundary. At the moment, cyclists have to travel down Barton Road and then transverse along Grange Road in order to get back to the West Cambridge site. And given the fact that that site, the employment will intensify from approximately 4,000 to 5,000 employees at the moment to 15,000 over the coming years, I think this is something that this particular route should be considering. And also, I'd like to see those radial kind of routes for cyclists introduced as part of the broader Greenways strategy. The final point that I would say is that Barton Road is a key approach into the city. Its context, its streetscape, it's characterised by leafy trees. And one of the key messages that I've had back from residents of Newnham, that any scheme needs to respect that existing streetscape, and in particular, those trees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, Peter, do you want to do anything by way of introduction to this, or do I go straight to Mike?
I was going to leave it to Mike to introduce.
Right then.
Thank you, questions.
Right then, well, I'm sure Mike is well known to you, Mike Davis, as the County Council's Principal Cycling Officer, so over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if the microphone's working. So I'll just cover the item and answer the questions in that as well. So some money's been allocated over a 2-year period to develop the 12 greenway routes. And as part of that process, we've adopted a bottom-up approach, engaging with local communities to maximise buy-in and look at local opportunities. We've staged about 25 events to sort of gather information to inform the routes for public consultation. The first routes that we'll be taking into consultation are Barton and Haslingfield, and that starts in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll then be moving on to Waterbeach and Fulbourn. Just looking at the questions, for when the detailed proposals will be brought forward as part of public consultation, there are no proposals to remove cobbles or historic features. The proposals have been developed working with Cambridge-based landscape architects Fit Studio, who have considered the environment very carefully. In terms of Councillor Cantrill, the Gothway to West Cambridge link isn't currently included in Barton or Haslingfield greenways. It could be included certainly as an option in the Comberton Greenway consultation, subject to further investigation about land ownership, etc. Range Road, Barton Road, this proposal is included in the upcoming Barton Greenway consultation for improvement, and also the Newnham Road, Barton Road is included in the Haslingfield proposals. And just to reassure, we have committed to no removal of birch trees on Barton Road. The other part of the report relates to the Quick Wins programme. This has been developed in response to those events that we've held and some of the suggestions coming forward. Appendix 5 outlines the programme, and subject to approval by the Executive Board, we feel this is something that we could start later this summer. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I think that's great. Councillor Bates, would you like to add anything before we proceed to discuss? No? Okay, members. Councillor Cameron, yes, you are our cycling champion, so we'll start with you.
Thanks for reminding me. Very much welcome this initiative. I've been to some of the public events, and it's really heartening to have some positive responses from people about these proposals. One thing I'm very pleased about in particular is the mention of the Tins path and the bridge on the Tins path, which runs from Cherry Hinton into the centre of Cambridge, and that bridge has been a huge danger for cyclists and pedestrians, particularly in the winter, because it freezes up and so on. So it's really good to see that there's mention of a possible new bridge there. And linked to my question is also, it's good to see that the people who responded to the consultation were keen on the Waterbeach route, to see a cycle route going parallel to a railway. But that just alerted me, as well as the bridge, to the involvement of Network Rail. To my understanding, having negotiations with Network Rail can be problematic, to say the least at times. So I was just wondering if you've had any early discussions with Network Rail about using their land and so on, and also about this, what I think is a great initiative to do something about the bridge, the Tins route bridge. Thanks.
Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I certainly back up what Nola said on
microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I certainly back up what Nola said about the bridge, the Tins route bridge. But also a couple of other things. picking up on this Network Rail issue, if you go down to the current shared path, which is going to form part of the Greenway to Fulbourn, round the back of Fulbourn Tesco's, it is virtually impossible to negotiate it at the moment because of overhanging bushes and trees and undergrowth, most of which is coming from Network Rail's side of the fence. And it's virtually impossible to get them to do anything about it. And one of the issues which we've raised before on this committee and elsewhere in the county is that once we have constructed these cycleways, and the A10 is another good example, we don't have any money in the budget to maintain them. And over time, we get the undergrowth creeps over them, the trees creep over them, the bushes grow over them, and there is no money to do anything about it. So please, you know, if with these greenways and the sort of the problems in the name really, Greenway, can we please ensure that we have a budget, a revenue budget, to support the maintenance of these greenways? That's one thing. The second thing, I'm very pleased to see that under the Quick Wins programme, we're talking about linking the excellent path that's been built in Fulbourn Road to the Fulbourn Greenway and to Tesco's, and certainly going to be a big improvement. Can we also, though, include a safe crossing of Yarrow Road at the roundabout? It is extremely dangerous for cyclists who use that cycle path to go to Fulbourn and, more importantly, Capital Park, have to negotiate a very dangerous roundabout which has no safety facilities for cyclists whatsoever. So that, I hope, will be included. And also, on the other side of the railway, when Yarrow Road becomes Gazelle Way, that we bear in mind that we have Cherry Hinton North going to be built at the other end, on the north side of the Greenway, and again we will need a decent cycle link from Cherry Hinton North to the Greenway. So perhaps, you know, when we're looking at the 106 contributions from that they might fund an extension in the opposite direction from the Greenway North to the Cherry Hinton North development.
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Topping.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got three questions or 3 points. The first of which is the most serious, and then it gets more humorous as we go on. The first question is are we confident that we will not need to widen, or have we baked into these proposals a confidence about the width of the cycle paths? Because what I wouldn't want us to do is to discover that later on we find we need to have a wider, literally wider cycle path, and that raises issues of budgeting and who owns the land and also some of the issues about environmental impact. So I want us to be reasonably clear that we've done that surveying in good order. Because I do think these have these are a good thing for us to be doing, and I'm particularly pleased that not all these cycleways are driving into Cambridge, because it reflects the point that Edward Lee was making, that if you have sufficiently safe cycleways that connect one village to another, then that in itself will encourage that modal shift that we're looking for. So I welcome that. And finally, I would hope that at least one of these greenways could be named sort of Francis Burkitt Boulevard or something, because it seems.
Oh dear.
It seems to me.
Going so well.
In times past, when the Greater Cambridge Partnership was having some choppy waters, Councillor Burkitt came up with the Greenways proposal as something that everyone could be in favour of, and so in some way we ought to try and pay tribute to that. But that last point was levity.
Go for that.
No, we must not take the name of the former chairman of the executive board in vain. He did sterling work, and I hope he's having a very good time wherever he is right now. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points from me. The Barton and Hazelfield greenways are undergoing proposal. I know there has been an issue around Grantchester not feeling sufficiently involved in either the pre-engagement or the consultation. And that I'm pleased to hear that is being dealt with. But just to emphasise that as these consultations are going on, to properly include the villages in between as well as those that they are primarily serving. And I guess the other point echoes Councillor Cantrill in terms of connecting up to the biomedical campus. Clearly in the pre-engagement there wasn't that much appetite for people from Barton to be heading into the biomedical campus, but maybe they weren't thinking along those lines because the pre-engagement was focused on getting into the city centre. I'm sure it's too late now to include it in the Barton Greenway proposal, but it does strike me that Comberton and Barton would be well served by a link down to Trumpington as well to get to the biomedical campus, and maybe that's something that can be considered in future phases of Greenway's consideration. Thanks.
Okay, I'll take Councillor Wilson first, and then I'll come to Dr. Wells.
I've got 2 points. You referred to consultation exercises, and on the map there's a greenway between Cottenham and Oakington. Has any consultation been carried out with people in Cottenham? I know there have been consultation exercises in Oakington, but I'm not aware of any in Cottenham. My second point is on the St Ives Greenway. My understanding is that parts of that are underwater for about half of the year, and what action will be taken to remedy that?
Thank you. Dr. Wells, please.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. So I have a specific point on the quick wins map. So I was having trouble reconciling the quick wins map on page 59 and the broader A310 on what I suppose is page 62. Because the quick wins is proposing a link between Comberton and Barton. Such a link does not exist on what I understand to be, if you like, the master plan. So, I mean, in a sense, the obvious question is why are we building a piece of infrastructure that isn't on our final plan as an interim step? Maybe I'm missing the point.
Right then, a little conundrum there for Mr. Davis to think about, whilst Councillor Peake.
I was asked by the representative of Cambridge, past, present and future, who hasn't been able to make it today, to pick up this question of the Quick Wins programme. It says in the report, and I think this is kind of a flag to a lot of people who care about the environmental aspects of what we're doing, it says that the schemes require minimal consultation, and that is something that is worrying to some people who are defending particular aspects. And Cambridge PPF are telling me that they don't disagree in principle with this programme, and they're not trying to be obstructive to what's trying to be achieved, but they did want specifically reassurance that paths can't just be widened without some form of planning application, so that there is a process around dealing with fit with the local environment and the local area. Not wanting to take time up about particular complaints or issues in this sort of forum, wanting to understand that minimal consultation doesn't just mean you go off and do it, everyone finds out about it afterwards.
Right then, if I could just pick up on Councillor Solomon's, well, one of Councillor Solomon's questions about the direct link from Barton to Cambridge Biomedical campus, if I understood it correctly. And I may not have been paying complete attention, Mr. Davis, when you replied to Mr. Cantrill's questions. I think you covered the nice rural verges and the junction, but did you touch on the direct link, not having to go onto Grange Road? So if you can maybe pick up on that.
Yeah, the Cough-Way link you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I was just saying that could be included in the Comberton Greenway, which we're currently formulating the options for. Yeah.
So anyone else want to? Oh, sorry, that's Andy. Yeah.
So probably going last, as everyone already said everything. But I particularly pick up on what Cantrill said about the sort of interconnectivity. Very much looks on the map. We said some travel schemes initially. It's all about getting from outside in. I think those shorter term journeys are more interesting. So what would be quite nice to see on all of these is how they connect with what we call hubs. So every train station. So for example on the A10 it goes along Melbourne and there's no mention of Foxton Station. Probably just as well because there's nowhere to park if you bike at Foxton Station at the moment. So perhaps we should start thinking a bit more about those short-term journeys into connectivity. It's fine if you're on a greenway, but if you're half a mile off a greenway, and it's a dangerous road, there may well not be a greenway there. So I think if we can make them look like feathers, Mike, you know what I mean? So that we could get more, see how those shorter journeys might all add up together, and I'm sure some of those maps do exist, but I think if we can move away from that, it's always a super highway going into town. And I would like to just reinforce the maintenance of these cycleways. So AstraZeneca sponsor the vegetation cuts on the A10 cycleway at the moment, so we can do extra cuts because it's particularly important to our staff. Other cuts are now done by local councillor Susan van der Ven and her team of local plucky, I have to say, volunteers who've actually had to be trained to use special cutting devices and done health and safety checks, which I think is a fantastic example of localism and getting things done, but perhaps doesn't reflect a GCP strategy around greenways. So I'd like to see any schemes we come forward with have some sort of maintenance plan, so it's not just the cost of those schemes, but the cost of maintaining them over an extended period of time.
And then, well, I can't help mentioning the Cottenham, sustainable Cottenham commitment to keep clearing up the cycleways out of Cottenham. And so the local action does have a part to play in all this sort of stuff. Any other points from members before we ask Mike Davis to respond to as many of those as he feels comfortable with? No? Okay, Mike, over to you.
So regarding the TIMs, we have had initial discussion with Network Rail. We are talking to them on other projects. I wouldn't say it's always a negative experience, but you know, sometimes there are staff changes and things can take a long time. But the bridge on the Tins is actually owned by Network Rail, so the conversation is going to be along the lines of us paying for a new bridge that they currently maintain. In terms of maintenance, one of the work streams within Greenways is around maintenance. So we recognise from the outset that it is an important thing that we need to look at. There are a couple of ideas for maintenance, one of which is commuted sums. So we negotiate a figure from the capital pot to pass on to maintenance budgets. But we are also certainly trying to encourage any sort of volunteer or ranger type networks. And it's certainly a thought that the routes we build first might be those that actually have some sort of local support network in place. So the sustainable Cottenhams or the Melbourne type models. And of course any sponsorship opportunities or anything like that would be warmly welcomed, or indeed to sort of campaign for some sort of change of policy within the County Council in terms of maintenance. Cherry Hinton North, the Section 106 negotiations are underway, and there's a lot of talk about cycle routes and crossings and issues such as that, which ones will come out of the development, which might be paid through greenways. So a lot of that is being covered, and as you say, that's one of the really quick wins, because we're hoping we can keep the contractor on Fulbourn Road and sort of carry on round the corner. So it's a good example. But we will look at those crossings that you've mentioned. In terms of path width, I think this is something very much for the actual formal consultation, because I think every part of every greenway will be different. it's easy to say nearer Cambridge they'll be wider, because that's not really the case. Some of the large employment sites and larger villages are actually further out. But certainly the likes of Waterbeach, which is a sort of greenfield type of greenway, will be looking for probably a 3.5 metre wide tarmac path with a 2 metre grassy strip alongside it, which is more for horse riders and ramblers, and also that kind of strip gives plenty of scope for landscaping, ecology, public art and that sort of thing. So I think Waterbeach is the interesting one at this stage because it's very much a greenfield site. In terms of naming, well, I won't really answer that further. Just to say that, you know, as it happens to have worked out, you know, the two of the earlier greenways are Barton and Haslingfield, so perhaps Francis Burkett will be able to use some of those quickly. Grantchester Parish Council, I am aware that they wrote to us and had concerns about one of our earlier proposals to close the road or to trial that. So we did consider that, and we haven't included that in the consultation. My colleague did go with you to meet them the other evening, and I think that the channels of communication are there now and much better. And we have listened to their proposal for the other route near the rugby club. There is certainly scope to propose other routes as part of the consultation. There'll be a free text box to make other ideas. And we've said all along that we hope there will also be a Greenways 2, so some of these other links, some of these circular trips perhaps can be covered by a future phase further on down the line. We didn't actually hold an event in Cottenham. The Cottenham to Oakington, as with the Barton to Comberton, is very much a link. So we're saying this is a Greenways network, but we are recognising there are links as well. And as Andy suggests, in the end they'll probably look more like sort of fish bones with a main greenway with local links as well, obviously subject to budget and subject to the sorts of ideas we get in the consultation. The busway has been prone to flooding. It did flood very briefly earlier this year, but there were 4 years prior to that with no flooding. But we recognise that's an issue. To address that is quite complex in terms of the Environment Agency, but certainly that's the sort of thing that will come up in the consultation, and we will consider that. In terms of quick wins and consultation, I mean, with anything we do, there will be some sort of consultation. It may just be a localised letter drop. That will then flush out anyone who's got very strong concerns about, for instance, path widening. But we will be considering when and if we get the funding, how we do that consultation. But it's striking a balance. There seems to be an appetite to actually get on and deliver some of these projects. And obviously we've got to balance that with an appropriate amount of consultation and looking at those responses. I think I've covered most things.
Right, and you've even persuaded the electrical connection to close correctly. So thank you very much. Members, were all your questions answered to your satisfaction there? And I picked up a feeling that these greenways are so popular we want lots more of them, but that's not within our gift right now. Do we give an endorsement to this paper? And, yeah, lots of nods around the table. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. That you're preaching to the conversion maybe, and so well done and good luck with that. Which brings us to item 13 at last. I'm sorry to have kept you all waiting. I'm going to begin with the chairman of the of the South East Local Liaison Forum, and then we'll hear from the officer and take it from there. So, no longer Councillor Orgy, but Tony Orgy, speak to us. Yes, thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks very much. The Local Liaison Forum met on the 6th of June to consider the outcomes of the February to April consultation. Having been informed that decisions on the strategies would be deferred, the meeting focused almost entirely on the common elements, which are called interventions. The forum noted that each of the 17 interventions gathered more support than opposition, and there were no comments at the forum meeting that opposed the principle of any of the interventions. One of the features of the consultation process was, in many cases, the relatively high percentage of no opinion. Some respondents felt it inappropriate to comment on interventions that were some way away from where they lived, whilst other respondents felt that more weight should be given to local responses, as those local to a specific intervention might well have a better and deeper appreciation of the potential ramifications of that local intervention. And that leads naturally on to the concerns that were expressed about the closure of the central reservation at the Dean Road crossroads, and the concern that this would lead to HCVs diverting to unsuitable roads through local villages such as West Wickham and Horseheath in order to access the A1307 towards Cambridge. There are similar views about having no right turn except for buses out of Linton High Street, with the back road being considered to be completely unsuitable to deal with increased traffic. The forum therefore welcomed that the Dean Road crossroads proposal would be given further consideration, and that the Linton High Street no right turn proposal would be re-evaluated. The forum wanted further consideration to be given to speed limits along the A1307, and there was much support for a single speed limit outside villages. It was felt that further work would be necessary in relation to safety at the Babram crossroads, which were that issue was only mentioned in vague terms in the consultation, and further work in relation to cycleway access to Granter Park. The consultation included cycleways and a greenway that went close to Granter Park, but with gaps of several hundred yards to the actual site entrance. It was stated in the meeting that there will be further work on these issues by consultants, but the forum was of the view that it was important that local councillors and stakeholders should also be involved in this process. There was a plea for landscaping to be an integral feature of designs and for ecological matters to be given appropriate consideration. There were particularly adverse comments about the greenway, and focusing particularly on the present section of cycleway between Wandlebury and the roundabout entrance to the Babram Research Campus. It was felt that this narrow section of cycleway immediately next to the 1307, where there's a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, did not meet the principles of a greenway. In conclusion, the forum was pleased to see progress and that some interventions could be implemented this financial year, particularly the extra cycle racks at the Babram Road Park and Ride site, and making the traffic lights outside Linton Village College to be much smarter than they are at the present. The forum would make a strong request that local councils and stakeholders are actively involved in working up the details of the intervention. And finally, a representative from the Trumpeton Residents Association made a statement strongly critical of the delay in making decisions on the strategies in the consultation. But as you heard from your first question at this meeting, there are other views on that matter. So one of the key issues was about this idea of a greenway that is very narrow, with quite a deep curve, close to a very high-speed road, and with a significant hedge on the other side, meaning that cyclists had nowhere to go if there were any problems or issues. And in particular, when cyclists are going on that stretch of cycleway at night, with where they're going in the opposite direction to the cars coming immediately close to the cycleway, that they're dazzled by headlights, and it was quite dangerous. So those are really the issues which came out of the forum meeting. As a broad agreement for all the principles, some concern about some of the details, but real pleasure in the sense that we're actually getting towards doing something.
Right. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. It's really valuable to have that sort of feedback. So thank you very much for putting it together so succinctly.
Could I just say that I'm very sorry, but I'm chairing the meeting at 5:30 in the local village, and I've got to go by bus, and I'm going to get there on time, so I'm going to have to leave fairly quickly. No disrespect to the rest of the meeting.
Okay, and full marks for the sustainable transport option. Thanks to Joseph. That gets plenty of brownie points. Okay, so Actually, I was going to invite Ian to add anything, but he isn't here. So, yes, Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, not a lot to add from the Liaison Forum, Chair. This report was originally envisaged to be a little bit bigger. It was going to include the sort of decisions or proposals around what the future options and future phasing will be. Our hope is after the pause we'll be coming to the next cycle of meetings. So in the short term, it was focusing on those short-term interventions that are listed from paragraph 311 onwards. A number of them can be delivered this year, and so we want to get on with them. And I think the chairman of the forums outlined that there was broad support for that. I think we've agreed to take away a couple of the issues that were raised around the junction, the right turn ban, and look again at the greenways. But otherwise, we want to get on site and get some of this done. And then we will come back as soon as we're able with the sort of the wider proposals on future strategy.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. First of all, on the maps, on page 109 and presumably 110, you show the Agritech proposed. That actually was refused planning permission. The officers recommended refusal, and the South Cambs Planning Committee accepted that officer's recommendation. So in fact, I wouldn't want us to get into any controversial amend. So can we amend that and remove it? The other thing I wanted to ask about was the Wandlebury multi-user underpass. Now, looking at the responses to the consultation, that's page 77, A36. It would appear that the response to that was pretty negative, but it doesn't actually. I was looking for some explanation in the report about it, and there doesn't seem to be, unless I've missed it, anything about it in the report. So I wonder why, given that response in the consultation, and given the fact that we're looking at £1.5 million, could I have some further details about this, please, as to why it's still there?
Okay. No other members? Right. You sure? Right then, Mr. Blake.
That, Chair, I will defer to Andrew Munro, who's the project manager, who knows this, knows the answer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Munro.
Thank you. In respect to Agritech, yes, that was on the original consultation material. It was brought forward into these plans, but we will remove it for the next report. In respect to the Wandlebury underpass, overall it was well supported, so there were also comments and fairly strong support of it. Some groups have queried the cost. The challenge that we have there is that we have a high-speed road, it's at the end of a dual carriageway, and with the existing speed limit of 50 miles an hour, the reduced visibility, so we're already proposing to make an improvement to an accident cluster site at that location by moving Hayley Hill Road further away from the crest of the hill. The current Department for Transport standards for a road with that volume of traffic and that speed of traffic requires us to either create separator crossing or to provide signals. The conclusion that we came to was that, as we'd already rejected signals as a solution to the road junction, it was not possible to then implement signals to enable people to cross the road. Consequently, the only option we were left with was the underpass. I recognise the comments that have been made, the representations made regarding the cost, and I am proposing that we will do some value engineering on the proposals there to see whether we can achieve some savings. But at the moment, in terms of safety crossing the road at that location, an underpass is currently the only solution. A bridge would be unacceptable visually, is the conclusion we came to.
Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Lewis?
Yes, I mean, just that, elsewhere when we've considered underpasses, we've accepted that they are not very well used for obvious reasons, and prone to flooding as well. And I'm probably, at the end of the day, we'll probably find people not using the underpass but attempting to cross the road. And I just wonder whether we are trying to do something which, at the end of the day, actually won't be used, and we will have a road safety issue because people will try to cross the road at surface level. And why not accept that and try to engineer something for that, which in the long run would probably be cheaper anyway. It's not a cost issue for me, it's an issue that we know that people are reluctant to use underpasses, and whether or not this is actually going to be used and could in fact cause a road safety issue.
Right then, well, Councillor Bates wasn't here to receive that, but I'll make sure that point is passed on to the board for their consideration, because obviously, you know, I think those points are valid, even though there are many who favour that option, and the due consideration has already been given to keeping it in scheme. Anyone else want to go? No? Okay, so well that seems to be fairly good support. So yeah, thanks very much. And that takes us to the GCP quarterly progress report. So one of them straight now. We haven't done too badly. Well, can't say that yet. Oh dear, tempting fate. All right, Neve. Yes, right there, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me. I'm quite loud, so do say if not. So, for those of you who are new to the Assembly, this is an opportunity for us to talk through progress across the whole programme. So you'll notice, if you've had a chance to read, we use a rag rating to set out how we're getting on with some of the key schemes. We go through each work stream. There's also an overview in here of our community engagement over the last year or so. There's also an update on the West of Cambridge package, and there's we're asking the board to continue to support some skills work, which is outlined in here, and we're also asking the board to consider some feasibility work for some affordable housing schemes, one in South Cambs and one in the city, which some of you may be familiar with. So I guess if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Sarah Hayward is here to help us on finance, if there's any questions there, and I'm sure Beth will be happy to take any questions on the comms update.
Right then, who wants to kick off? Councillor Big.
Everyone else is deciding. I wanted to ask about the apprentices, the skills section. And just to note that the table at the bottom of page 344 looks very good in the sense that we paid for a particular intervention with CRC to try and improve the demand for apprenticeships from employers in particular areas, and it looks from this table as though we're achieving the effect that we wanted to achieve, so it seems very good. The factual question that I had was about the top of the following page, the numbers of apprentices. I mean, I'm finding it really difficult to believe that we are talking about numbers from 2014-15 and 2015-16, and we don't have any numbers since then. And why not? Yes, and because there has been a worrying trend nationally, which has caused a drop on a national basis, not even a smaller increase, but a drop, which we're obviously very keen to know how it breaks out in this area. I wonder if the following paragraph is telling us that you're still analysing the data, maybe you can give us a sneak peek into what you're finding.
Yeah, oh, Councillor Williams.
Well, just on the on page 343 regarding Cantrill High Street, I don't know whether I ought to declare it as finance portfolio holder for South Cambs. I'd be very pleased if you agree to this.
I'm sure you weren't supposed to say the second part. We accept your
I'm not influencing you at all.
No, of course, I've never dreamed of doing that.
Take up with
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. We'll strike that from the record, right? Anyone else then? Ah, yes, right, Councillor Price.
Just an inquiry really about skills and what work is done jointly with the combined authority, because I know that they've got a skills, and I substituted for the leader at one of the meetings and asked why they were trying to reinvent a wheel and not working with, or at least consulting with the Greater Cambridge Partnership, who have sort of probably got 2 or 3 years ahead on them. So I just wondered if there is any cross-working with the combined authority. Not to cause trouble at all.
Yeah, Councillor Massey and then Councillor Sullivan.
On the subject of apprentices, apprenticeships rather, well, I'd like to know what the average age of the apprenticeships that have been taken up so far. Only because I've been talking to various businesses who say that quite a lot of the applications they get for apprenticeships are actually from the age groups 25 and up, which means that although we are looking at the senior schools, they're not accepting them, which means maybe, which is why I'm also pleased to see that you have gone into 4 primary schools. So we do need to start looking at primary schools in particular and targeting our children younger, because I think sometimes by the time they get to 15, 16, they've already decided what they want to do, what they don't want to do. Moving on to page 347, smart panels, and it says that it's going to be rolled out, apart from the one that's in Shire Hall. Where will the locations of the other pilot schemes be? Will they be in town or will they be in a building? It would be much better if they're in town for the general public to be able to see them. And also the station gateway, which is on page 346, will that gateway be rolled out to Cambridge North Station?
Thank you. Councillor Topley.
Thank you, Chair. So, staying on that page 347, the autonomous vehicles, and I appreciate you may not have. Can we have a confidence that this is going to move at the pace that's being predicted here? And I say this because Oxford are running an autonomous vehicle pilot, I think it did. And I would not want us to come second to the other.
That's great competition, yes. Thank you very much for flagging that up, Councillor Topley. Dr. Wells?
So I had a question on the risk of troubling my neighbour here. Page 409 and 409, 10, 11. So with 3 items, so it's a question of principle, not of detail. But there, as I read it, there are 2 proposals there asking the partnership to fund £50,000 feasibility sort of preliminary study, one relating to Campbell, one relating to the stadium. It seems to me that there is a risk of the partnership simply becoming a good place to go and get a £50,000 contribution to any project. I'm not making a derogatory comment about these requests, but there is clearly a risk that we are seen as a place to go to get some money to top up or to add to some project. And I think it would be, they may exist, but it's not clear to me. So what are the principles about whether we should fund these kinds of things or not? Because this could be the beginning of what could be one of an endless stream of apparently worthy requests for funding of this sort. And if it's appropriate, then I've no problem doing it. But are we crossing a line?
Thank you. Andy?
so hesitating to take on the role of an officer, but I visited the autonomous vehicles in Berlin last Friday. And they do indeed exist, which is always a good starting point. We went on one, around a tour, and it went into lots of stops. Somebody deliberately walked in front of it and it stopped, which is another good.
They were very interesting.
So the basic requirements of a tick have been met. So I personally, as an officer, would say that I think our scheme has a good chance. It's going to be a good setting, so it's off-road on the guided busway. One of the things we need to think about is the speed that it will be able to go. So in this fairly built-up environment that we were in, the maximum speed was about 7 or 8 miles an hour, which is jogging pace. I think if we were going to use them on our more slightly further distances, we managed to speed them up. But I had some confidence following that visit that at least we were on the right path.
Right, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. And Councillor Dick,
Sorry, I wanted to group this, otherwise I didn't know how you were doing it.
No, that's great.
The question is about the communications section. And at the bottom of page 354, there's a reference to, right at the bottom, a reference to community sounding groups. This has been subject to some controversy outside the sort of the governance structures of the GCP. I think partly because people just found out about it and weren't quite sure where that fitted in and what purpose it needed. I'm personally an agnostic on this. I can see a point in improving the quality of input that officers get, but I wonder if this is an opportunity for you briefly just to say a few words about what this is and what it adds to the process.
Okay, yes, I didn't take section by section because you all look like rabbits in headlights to start with, members, so I gave you free rein, but officers will sort it all out for us and present in a cogent order.
Thank you, Chair. So if I take the first few points and then Beth might want to add something on comms at the end. Councillor Vick, on your question on apprenticeships, the information has indeed been available for some time, but was slow coming. I understand that the government were a little slow publishing it. My understanding is that was likely due to that the trend wasn't a good one. The trend I understand, but we don't have the finalised figures yet. We will have them for you next time. Is that the trend nationally has been going down significantly, and it may have also gone down in this area, but not nearly as much as it has in the other parts of the country. So we may see a decline, but one that isn't as bad. I think we're likely to summarise next time. And the work we're doing to continue work on skills, the next phase is to try and make sure the trend goes in the opposite direction next year. And Councillor Price, on your question of collaboration with the Combined Authority, so particularly on the new work that we're looking into at the moment, we are absolutely at officer level sharing that work and asking for their comment. So that is very much in collaboration. So the GCP has a target of 420 additional apprenticeships, as you know. So this next phase of work is to do what government asks us and get that right. The average age of apprentices so far, I don't know, and we'll find out for you and let you know. I think that, again, the next phase of work is about going into more primary schools. What experts are telling us is, as you said, that's exactly the right place to start influencing folk early. So there'll be a focus on that in the next round of work. Smart panels and on the gateway, again, I'll get back to you. I don't have that information. Councillor Tipping on autonomous vehicles. My understanding is that it's on track, not literally, not a heavy track. And I don't know about beating other cities. We just have to stay on track, I think. On Dr. Wells, on your point about should we, shouldn't we? So the principle, the first thing that officers look at is, does this scheme offer additionality? Would this scheme have happened anyway? if it would, we really ought not to be intervening. I think that's the kind of headline principle. We do get many requests for funding, and often they fall at the first hurdle because indeed we determine that they can be delivered without our intervention. So I would say that that's the first principle. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on that.
So are we saying then that the potential for the redevelopment of the Abbey Stadium scheme wouldn't happen without a Greater Cambridge Partnership?
So I think that's what this work is about, understanding. So the idea of doing a very, very early initial feasibility study is to understand exactly that.
Very helpful addition there, Councillor Price.
Yeah, Beth, do you?
Okay. So yeah, Councillor Vick, on your question on the community sounding group. There's a broader communications engagement update from page 353, which outlines the work that's been taken over the past 12 months generally to broaden and strengthen our community engagement with a number of different channels. The concept of a community sounding group, really a focus group of a small number of people from within the community across Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, is really to augment the channels that we already have. It really came about because we were finding that there were lots of separate meetings with lots of different groups at their request. Resource intensive, but that's not the point. Those groups weren't coming together to hear each other's voices in a room, in a round table setting, to have a constructive conversation about how we could take some things forward. So that was the rationale for establishing it. There was a planned publication, and our hand was forced on that rather, and we published after people had found out about it, which was unfortunate and not planned. The membership has grown initially organically, but this is a trial. It's very much in its formative stages, and we're listening to feedback, and we will reflect on the feedback and the reaction that we've had from some people, and it's including some city members.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solomon has another point.
Yes, so just interested to read the communications engagement update. There's clearly some good learnings on the local liaison forum review. Just on the Camborne to Cambridge, I know, Peter, you've made a sort of commitment to work up an optimal on-road solution involving the community. So this suggests that there are different ways in which that engagement could take place now. Will it be with the local liaison forum, or will it take a different form, and when will that take place, given the pause that there now is on that project?
When we're unpaused, we're going to go back to the liaison forum. Yeah. So the reason we haven't had one is because the partnership, the members of the partnership agreed, albeit reluctantly, to accept the pause, and frankly it would just have been disingenuous to just go along to liaison forum when you take away the bigger decisions, which wouldn't have been taken forward. There was nothing else to discuss. So that was the reason.
It was just to check that it will be back to the liaison forum rather than a different form.
Liaison forum.
Okay, thank you.
Right then, that completes the discussion of the quarterly progress report. That's great. All I have to do now is to thank you all for coming, and to remind you that the next meeting is 2 p.m. on Thursday the 20th of September.